HBO's The Last of Us is one of the most successful gaming adaptations of our time. Maybe depending on who you ask. That's not to say that it's completely faultless, and I'm definitely not the right person to gauge whether it does the game justice because I haven't played the game. What ended up catching my attention while I was watching season 2 was rehashing the reception to the original game when it came out in 2020. In particular, the discussion surrounding how Ellie, Dina, and Abby were centered in the narrative, obviously in the absence of Joel. Of course, that's undoubtedly a result of my algorithm and where I kind of reside on the internet, which is going to feature a lot more female-centered discussion. Either way, as a show watcher and a non-game player, I found myself most curious about how the reception to part 2 may have changed since 2020, particularly around gender norms and representation in the post-apocalyptic genre. I wondered whether being someone who was experiencing the narrative in a completely new medium would affect how I felt about it. After all, this is a relatively swift adaptation of a fairly recent game, which had its own massive cultural impact and discussion, and is now finding a brand new TV audience, as well as returning audiences rediscovering these themes 5 years on. I also wanted to add that it's been really wholesome experiencing this narrative for the first time alongside longtime game fans, who are probably excited to see new fans be absolutely emotionally devastated. Which, yeah, thanks for the warnings, everyone. Is there a particular episode that you're really curious as to what fans might discuss afterwards?
Yes. Episode 2 is quite a big one, and there's a lot of room for discussion after that. And also after the last episode, last episode of season 1, it's always left on a bit of like a cliffhanger, and there's a room for discussion after that. And I think the same happens with the last episode of this season.
From what I can gauge with The Last of Us Part 2, a lot of people were really mad. This particular review was blasted all over Google, and it's pretty intense. There's a lot of discontent around Ellie and Abby becoming the central characters, Ellie's relationship with Dina being in the spotlight, and just being very upset that Joel was out of the narrative. I think it's very valid to be upset that Joel died. I was very upset when Joel died. I managed to steer clear of that spoiler for a really long time, actually. I caught on like a few days before episode 2 because that's an occupational hazard of being on the internet all the time. And yeah, it's a huge risk to kill off one of the main characters, especially one that sparked so much debate about whether his actions were justified, his role in perpetuating the cycle of violence, and a truly deep appreciation of his character arc and his relationship with Ellie. Whoever they introduced as the one who killed Joel was not going to be well liked, and humanizing them was always going to be a huge ask. Who is someone that you're really excited for fans of either the game or the first season for them to meet in this upcoming season?
I'm excited for people to meet Caitlin, who plays Abby. She's an incredible character, and Caitlin's an incredible person, incredible actor, and the parallels between Ellie's story and Abby's story, I'm so excited for people to experience that and have this whole new person to care about and feel things for and sort of explore.
I think Bella being Bella they really carry that character, and it's so cool to be part of this next arc where 5 years have passed.
Are you okay?
What is wrong with you? I don't need your fucking help.
The villain redemption arc is a long and arduous journey, but when it's done well, I feel like my very first exposure to it might have been Vegeta in Dragon Ball Z, and he's now one of the most beloved heroes. Gaara's arc in Naruto is one of my favorites. I've lost track of how many times Loki switched sides in the MCU, but I love him anyway. There are a lot of them across popular culture, and when they're done well, there's something about them that's just so cool. Oddly enough, I think one of the most well done villain redemption arcs is Negan from The Walking Dead. And I say oddly enough because I haven't actually watched it. My friend did a dramatic retelling of the entire thing, and I cried. I didn't know who anyone was, and I still cried. In terms of popular media, I can recall way more examples of villain redemption arcs for male characters than female characters, which may simply be a consequence of there being more well-known male villains in general. It does make me wonder whether female characters end up not only being less believable as villains, but also less redeemable. Historically, female villains tended to be linked very closely to their culturally feminine qualities, like motherhood and love. And when they veered away from that, things got ugly. Think the historical prevalence of the wicked stepmother trope, or the unstable powered woman trope, where a female character's destructive potential is often tied to her feelings or womanhood, rather than some kind of logical objective. In terms of Abby being the main protagonist, some people felt that it was unbelievable that Joel would be taken down by a teenage girl of all things. And if he was, then that's just unforgivable. Not because she took down the fan fave, but because it's implausible. It doesn't feel real. This reaction really piqued my interest because the story is set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland where so many societal norms and rules come to die, and we theoretically get to re-examine these things with a new lens. However, it seems like even a zombie apocalypse can't shake off some of our most deeply rooted patriarchal thinking.
You stupid old man. You don't get to rush this.
I adore science fiction, but it has its fair share of long-standing misogynistic tropes and storylines. As a subgenre, post-apocalyptic speculative fiction has perpetuated these tropes in its own way. This article asks why the zombie apocalypse genre tends to suck so much for women using the 2013 film World War Z. It describes the genre as relying on existing political and social conditions to articulate anxieties, and can end up reasserting the norms of dominant power structures. In this movie, that manifests as a masculine, militarized response and the just warrior trope, whose participation in violence is reluctant but definitive, and he makes his sacrifice to protect his innocent women. The cultural context of when these stories are written and then what is determined to be the solution can be a commentary on what that current culture values. A lot of the time, that means masculinity. That was one of the criticisms that I saw about The Last of Us Part 2, how Ellie and Abby were quite masculine in their pursuit of revenge. That's a very loaded concept because, hey now, women can be just as capable of ruthless revenge. But in a genre that rarely centers women in the first place, it can feel a little reductive, particularly when you think about it in conjunction with research like this, which analyzes The Walking Dead and how gender norms like division of labor and the dutiful wife persevere within its post-apocalyptic setting. Together, it kind of ends up feeling like you have to either be really masculine or do the dishes. 2006's Children of Men is a haunting, masterful exploration of a future set in 2027 where society is crumbling after decades of infertility. Key, a young refugee, is revealed to be pregnant, and the story follows the attempt to escort her to a research group, which sounds very familiar. And while it's undoubtedly an incredible, beautiful, complex movie, it is hinging on a woman's reproductive capacity as the central plot. Not an issue in and of itself, but again, if that's the most prevalent way that women show up in these narratives, it feels kind of reductive. The post-apocalyptic genre gives us a chance to create brand new alternatives, so why do we so often fall back on the norms that we're used to? That being said, it does seem to be shifting, and I'm seeing more female characters in these post-apocalyptic narratives that are here to play. The Hunger Games franchise is still going strong with amazingly nuanced female leads. Katniss Everdeen remains one of the all-time greats of the dystopian fiction genre, with her inner turmoil about being a revolutionary symbol, cleverly playing to her strengths in combat, and being a total lover girl. I haven't finished the game yet, but playing as Aloy in Horizon Zero Dawn, which originally came out in 2017, has been so much fun and makes me kind of feel like a bad bitch. The 2024 TV adaptation of Fallout stars Ella Purnell as Lucy, and she is on a goddamn mission. And the whole cast seemed so aware of what they were bringing to the screen. Ella, to me, your voice is so distinctive as Jinx in Arcane, which obviously is another incredible adaptation. Walton, you've done Tomb Raider as well, and now Aaron, and all three of you are in Fallout. Do you think that there is a big difference between what fans and non-fans of the game appreciate and like about the adaptation? And extended to that, do you think that there will be a big difference for this particular series?
I think that there are different expectations, right? When you talk about Tomb Raider, there are fans that have been playing that game for a really long time, and they look for the things that they look for in that experience. But then there are people that just like Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of aspect of an adventure story, right? I think those two things kind of exist simultaneously, and a lot of these things have crossover for everyone.
For Fallout, I think fans get the opportunity to have a tone that they recognize, that is uniquely Fallout. And I think newcomers just get to be surprised by that. It's very different than, the tones of other post-apocalyptic films and TV shows. It's Fallout specific,
For me, there is definitely a feeling of intimidation coming into something that's already so well known and so loved. But I think that comes from just truly really respecting and loving the source material and wanting to do justice to a passionate fan base and something that so many people have spent so many years building up and working so hard on. But also because our characters don't exist in the game, there's also a certain element of creative freedom. So you get to bring your own thing to it and hope that you're kind of building upon the franchise. I don't know.
Yeah, well put.
Yep.
That's really well said.
After all these wins in the genre, it's jarring that there was still such a backlash to Ellie and Abby in The Last of Us Part 2. Even if you may not connect to the characters and their motivations, there's certainly a way to criticize it without it boiling down to basic misogyny. Essentially, critics of The Last of Us Part 2 may accuse it of being some woke girl power storyline when it's not necessarily taking any great strides in the grand scheme of post-apocalyptic speculative fiction. Particularly when you consider some of the commentary that the show shies away from making TV Ellie as ruthless and perhaps less redeemable than the game, which some people think is to avoid the backlash that the game received. It may be a post-apocalyptic, post-patriarchal world in there, but out here, not so much.
But if somehow I had a second chance at that moment, I would do it all over again.
It's only been 5 years since The Last of Us Part 2, but a lot has happened. Girl boss feminism petered out to make way for celebrating girlhood with girl maths and girl dinner. Less fun has been the slippery slope towards gender normative trends like trad wives and divine feminine energy. We've also had some really nuanced, refreshing portrayals of female characters, especially morally grey ones. I love how some characters and their impact and power is rooted in their femininity rather than in spite of it. I love the ones whose impact doesn't come from that at all. The key really is to have it all. Not in a women can have it all kind of way, but just having all kinds of women. I like that Abby is a cutthroat baddie, but if that was the only depiction of female strength on screen, I'd be less psyched. Women are people, after all, who are just as complex and diverse as people are. It's part of the reason why I loved a show like Arcane, which is set in a fantasy steampunk world that had an incredible variety of female characters who were powerful in very different ways. It's why I adore the Hunger Games franchise, with Katniss, Prim, Lucy Gray, Wyrus all demonstrating incredibly different strengths and weaknesses. Frankly, seeing some of the commentary that the TV series shies away from making Ellie as ruthless and emotional and less redeemable than the game kind of bummed me out. I want more. I want vengeful, diabolical women who will stop at nothing to get what they want. I want both male and female characters to be emotionally charged and logically efficient, because neither of those things are gendered. Trying to forge an identity under a patriarchal culture that demands too much of some things and too little of others can make things really fucking hard for everyone involved. It's jarring to think that even after an apocalypse, we can't shake that off. You can absolutely despise Abby for what she did to Joel, but you can't deny that Abby and Joel are cut from the same cloth, blinded by the same fierce loyalty that they have for their loved ones. And I think it's valid to question why those traits might be hated in Abby, but respected in Joel. She can certainly be hated for brutally killing off a beloved, complicated character and setting another on the path of destruction. But if that hate stems from a criticism that it doesn't feel plausible, even in a post-apocalyptic world where survival can come down to an infected cut, a broken ankle, or a teenage girl with a golf club, that's when it kind of feels like misogyny with more steps.